8th grade and 11th grade, please report to your seminar location, and seniors with senior release are released at this time.
All right, hello everybody. So what I want to do here is I want to give you directions for today's group writing assignment. Today we are in what I believe is phase 4. I've kind of lost track of phases at this point, but we're moving on to the next step. So what's going to happen today is you are going to, let me just share my screen here so you can see what I'm referring to. You are going to open up your group's copy of the template, and you're going to do this independently. So you're not going to start out in groups today. You're going to start out just working on your own. So what I'm doing right now is I am pretending that I'm in a group. We're working on the same writing assignment that you've been working on. The difference is we're writing about the Mask of the Red Death instead of writing about the film that you're writing about. So I'm pretending that I'm sitting at my desk and I have just re-accessed a template that my group mates and I have been contributing to. And here's what I see on the template. I see a claim. So here's the claim that we wrote together. My teacher has commented upon it. We've fixed it up a little bit together. Not only that, but my group has decided to do a little bit of color coordinating.
10th grade, please report to your seminar location. 7th grade and 10th grade, please report to your seminar location.
We've done a little color coordinating just to help us keep track of, what evidence to gather and that sort of thing. So here's our claim. In Edgar Allan Poe's short story, The Mask of the Red Death, it is clear that literary vampirism is being implemented in the characterizations of both Prince Prospero and the masked partygoers. Then underneath here, we have our first piece of evidence, and our first piece of evidence is actually the definition of this concept. Quick note, if your group has not included right after your claim a definition of your concept, of your literary convention, please make sure that you include that piece of evidence. Otherwise, you're operating under the assumption that your reader knows the convention and is understanding it and defining it in the same manner that you are, and you really can't necessarily count on that. So we actually, in my group, decided to plop down this first piece of evidence together, and here's what we wrote. A literary vampire is any character who exploits their victim, uses others to achieve their own goals, denies others rights to live as those others may choose, if that way interferes with the vampire character's desires, and places their needs and wants above any other characters or characters. And underneath that, on the paragraph template, there's a spot to write a tie back to connect it back to the claim. And there's really nothing to tie back here. This is a piece of evidence that is almost an extension of the claim.
Please report to your seminar location. 6th grade,
Watching this video is going to be cool because it's going to be like you're in a time machine traveling back. Traveling back like 70 minutes in time. Exciting stuff indeed. But anyway, this is almost like an extension of your claim. It provides additional parameters for your analysis. So there's nothing to connect back to here. What we're going to be doing is connecting our details about Prospero and the partygoers back to this definition. So we decided there was no tie back necessary. We then, at the end of class on Friday, divided and conquered who was going to look for evidence where. I'm going to pretend I was working with Mrs. Miller, Mrs. Countryman, Miss Norman, and me. We were a group of 4. So whoever I said first, did I say Mrs. Miller? So Mrs. Miller was responsible for finding a piece of evidence about this character from the beginning of the story. Mrs. Countryman was responsible for this character, the second half of the story. Miss Norman was responsible for these characters for the first half of the story. And then I was going to hunt for evidence for these characters from the end of the story. So on Friday, in the last 10 minutes or so of class, Mrs. Miller found a piece of evidence about Prince Prospero, and she plopped it down right here in this spot on the template. So what happened and what's going to happen today is you're just going to basically move one spot down on the template from where you personally contributed, and you are going to read the piece of evidence that your group mate put in the template. So what I'm doing here is I'm looking at this piece of evidence for the first time. I didn't gather the evidence. Mrs. Miller did. She followed directions very well, and I hope that you did too. She did not tie back this piece of evidence to the claim. She just put the piece of evidence down. It is my job to tie this piece of evidence back. It is your job today to tie back the piece of evidence that your group member put on the template. So since I provided the last piece of evidence, I'm trying to tie back this very first piece of evidence. So what I have to do, obviously, is I have to read it. So here's the piece of evidence that Mrs. Miller collected. The prince had provided, so the prince in this story, this Prince Prospero, that we said basically is a literary vampire. This character here is this right here. The prince had provided all the appliances of pleasure. There were buffoons, there were improvisatori, there were ballet dancers, there were musicians. All these and security were within, without was the Red Death. So here's what I'm doing right now. I am trying to answer the following question. Why did Mrs. Miller pick out this piece of evidence? Remember that tiebacks reasoning sentences, they answer the why question, they answer the how question. Why was this evidence selected? How does this evidence connect back to the claim? So what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to answer that question. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to write the next sentence or 2 or 3 or 4 or however many sentences it takes for me to tie this back. So in order to do that, I actually am discovering that it might be beneficial to me personally to have a dictionary. So bear with me. I'm going to grab one. Trusty Webster's New World. Here it is. So the other thing I'm going to do, and I don't usually do this when I write, but sometimes I do, and sometimes I recommend to writers that they try this out. My son Caleb, actually, who is a 4th grader, he sometimes when he writes, just because he's, not quite there yet developmentally, he does this sometimes when he writes paragraphs for his ELA classes. But I'm actually going to use the voice to text feature here. And if you've never used that before, if you are in Google Docs and you go to Tools and then go down to Voice Typing and then click to speak, what it will do in the doc here is it'll just, put in text anything that you say. So what I'm going to do right now verbally while simultaneously using this feature is I'm going to do my best to start tying this thing back. So the question I'm asking myself is, why did Mrs. Miller pick out this piece of evidence? All right, so first of all, oh, shoot, I have to allow it. All right, so first of all, I'm going to go ahead and explain what these things are. The prince, in order to host this party, basically made these buffoons come in. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to look that term up. Buffoons are okay. So buffoons are basically clowns. So the prince, in order to host this party, took some people from outside his castle that act as clowns, that act as entertainment, and he made them come. I don't know what improvisatori is, so I'm going to look that up next. And I'm going to use the following transition. And he also sorry for the awkward silence. I know this is extreme. Oh, geez, and now it's going to type this. Okay, it does not have the term improvisatori, but it says to improvise is to compose and perform without preparation. So I think I have it. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to delete all this nonsense because it's not going to be helpful to me. And I'm going to say the following. In order to have this party in his castle, the prince took from outside community members and brought them into the castle to entertain everybody. Buffoons are basically clowns, and improvisatori are actors. He also brought in dancers and musicians. So these people from outside the castle gates it seems, have been forced by the prince to come inside the castle and entertain the wealthy people who are there. This is an example of... Oh, it's not going to let me go up there. Darn it. But I have to remember what the claim says. The first part of the claim said that vampires exploit their victims. So this is an example of exploitation because is a good start to my tie-back language. This is an example of exploitation because it is implied that the prince is not paying these individuals, nor did he ask if they wanted to perform. He, quote unquote, provided their entertainment to the wealthy folks, so they probably didn't have a say in the matter, period. All right, just to be clear, I don't love that particular feature, but sometimes it does prove helpful to get my thoughts going, and it might prove helpful to some of you as well who've never done that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this back, and I'm going to just clean it up. My goal is to make it very clear that this piece of evidence supports the claim. The claim is that Prince Prospero is a literary vampire. He's a literary vampire because some of his behavior, some of his actions connect back to the definition. So if a literary vampire is any character who exploits their victim, then this particular piece of evidence can be explained as follows. The prince had provided all the appliances of pleasure. There were buffoons, there were improvisatori, there were ballet dancers, there were musicians. All these and security were within. Without was the Red Death. So in editing this, I have to get rid of all that excess nonsense language that I spoke. But in order to have this party in his castle, the prince took from outside his gates. I left that out. I think I said it later, but I'm going to pop it in here. In order to have this party in his castle, the prince took from outside his gates community members who act as entertainers and brought them into the castle to, I just used the word entertainer, so I might want to change this word here. Yeah, I'm just going to put a line there because I'm not sure I'm going to put in yet, but I'll find some other word to entertain everybody. Buffoons. And I know my son Caleb's much better at this feature than I am. He knows. I think you have to just say period if you wanted to put a period in. I just kind of talk, and then I go back through and add the punctuation in afterwards. But obviously a piece of punctuation was missing there, so I would add it here. Buffoons are basically clowns. And improvisatori, so from the text itself, that was an I, not a Y. So an improvisatori are actors. He also brought in, and it said literally the word dancers in the quotation. So I probably should put quotations around this. And that's also a nod back up to the quotation to remind my reader that I'm basically breaking the quote down right now. So he also brought in dancers and musicians. So these people from outside the castle gates, it seems. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to end the sentence here instead of trying to connect it to the next sentence via the word so, which is called a coordinating conjunction. I'm just going to start a new sentence. These people from outside the castle gate, so I'm just going to refer to them here as community members. These community members, it seems, have been forced by the prince to come inside the castle and entertain the wealthy people who are there partying, because that's essentially what they're doing. This is an example of exploitation because it is implied that the prince is not paying these individuals, nor did he even ask. I add in the word even. For some reason right now, it seems to me like it emphasizes somehow. Maybe it's just extra unnecessary wording. I sometimes have issues with that. But I'm going to pop it in there. Nor did he even ask if they wanted to perform. He quote unquote provided their entertainment. He quote unquote provided their entertainment to the wealthy folks, so they probably didn't have a say. Okay. So it literally used the word provided. So nor did he even ask if they wanted to perform. He, as the quote states, provided there. I'm going to call them services this time around since we've used entertainment numerous times. I know this is taking longer than it probably seems is necessary, but what I'm trying to do is model for you how explaining evidence is a time-consuming process. I mean, really what reasoning is it's a writer's attempt to get his or her thoughts, his or her explanations from here onto the page so that somebody else can read it and completely follow it. So it's basically it's thought on the page. So it should be hard. It should be time consuming. It should result in multiple sentences. It shouldn't come easily. And that's exactly what you're going to be doing today is reading somebody else's evidence, maybe using this feature to talk through it first, or just starting by typing, which quite frankly is what I ordinarily would do, so that you can leave today's writing workshop having engaged in the reasoning process, having gotten some reasoning down in print, and then ultimately you're done with the first paragraph. If everybody's tied back somebody else's evidence, you're going to end up with a nice quality paragraph with multiple pieces of evidence and multiple bits of reasoning. He, as the quote states, provided their entertainment to the wealthy folks, so they probably did not have a say in the matter. On to the next piece of evidence. So in the sake of this scenario, I think it was Mrs. Countryman. Mrs. Countryman would have plopped down a piece of evidence here last week or over the weekend. So today, Miss Norman would be reading this piece of evidence, going back up to the claim, and then trying to write the reasoning for this piece of evidence. So that's what's going to happen today. You're going to access the template like I just did here. You're going to go to the piece of evidence below the one that you provided, read it, and then you're going to spend 10, 15 minutes writing the reasoning sentence for that piece of evidence. After everybody's had some time to do that, probably give you a few moments to get back into the groups, reconvene, and kind of talk things out together and make some modifications. You know, just for the sake of example, a suggestion I think I would give my group is that maybe we should, even though it's the first piece of evidence here in the template, we maybe should save this piece of evidence and this tieback for a little bit later in our paragraph. The reason being that we haven't even established any sort of context. And I have a feeling that some of the later pieces of evidence that, for example, maybe Miss Norman's piece of evidence, even though it's down here later on the template, it might come from earlier in the story, and it might be a better place to provide some context about the nature of the party, why we're even having a party here in this story. So when we get back into our groups and kind of read this over and look it over together, I might say to my group mates, hey, I think it's a good idea for us to copy and paste this and actually move it down a little bit later in the paragraph. So that will happen last today in writing workshop is you'll reconvene in groups for, 10 minutes or so, kind of read through things, talk to each other about ideas you have for better organization, that sort of thing. I hope the video is clear. The good news is we're watching it, and then I'm right here to answer any questions about it. So that's today's steps.